actually the real monster is Victor Frankenstein.
Obviously. Everyone knows that. Yeah, that's obvious.
No, you don't get it, because listen, the creature is like tall and a bit violent and has really bad skin. So people look at him and they see a monster, right? But really, if you think about it, the actual monster is his creator. That's deep, right? That's like so deep. They really thought they did something there. Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia. I went to see Frankenstein at the cinema the other week and I have thoughts. Mostly thoughts about how this adaptation fundamentally misunderstands Mary Shelley's novel. Frankenstein 2025 takes a story about loss and love and loneliness and turns it into what I can only describe as a wanky man film. Not a bad wanky man film by any means, but a wanky man film nonetheless. I should probably stop saying wanky man film and start explaining what I mean by that. But let me get one thing straight before we get into the discourse. I'm not reviewing this as a film in the context of other Frankenstein films. Wikipedia reliably informs me that there have been approximately 50,000 films and TV shows inspired by Frankenstein in the past century or so. And the only one of those I've seen is that one Doctor Who episode where the TARDIS lands on the shores of Lake Geneva and Jodie Whittaker hangs out with Mary Shelley before fighting a Cyberman. Other than that, I'm approaching this purely as a fan of the novel. Speaking of which, this is your one and only spoiler warning. I'm going to talk in depth about the plots of both Frankenstein the novel and the 2025 Netflix movie adaptation. If you've not read the book, do yourself a favor and treat yourself to this absolute masterpiece of a story. It's not a long read and you can easily access it for free as an ebook or even as an audiobook. Trust me, it's worth it. Oh, and another disclaimer, this one for the nerds among you. When I talk about the book, I am for the most part referring to the 1831 edition, since that's the one I've read most recently. Though I might slip up and accidentally bring up something that's only in the 1818 edition. I'm only human, okay? And being human is what this whole thing is allegedly all about. Despite the allegations, I don't actually mind when book adaptations make changes to the source material. I understand that film is a different medium to the written word, and I understand that movies don't exist in a vacuum. They are made to be consumed by the masses, and therefore they have to appeal to a whole different audience demographic than the original book. In this particular case, the original target audience of the novel Frankenstein has been dead for well over a century, so I can't blame the filmmakers for not considering them when making adaptive decisions of plot. Changes in movie adaptations are not just fine, they are necessary for, adapting the story from one medium to another. I made a whole video about that last year, which you're welcome to peruse at your discretion. Link down below. Frankenstein 2025 makes some changes to the novel that I think are fine or even good. One of the most obvious ones, for example, is moving the story forward from the late Georgian setting of the novel to the 1850s. When the first images of the film were released months ago, I was admittedly a little disappointed to find out that they'd made that change. But actually watching the film, it didn't bother me at all. I understand why they did this. Frankenstein, the pop culture phenomenon, is so tightly connected with a specific Victorian-inspired steampunk aesthetic that having the characters walk around in breeches and Empire waist dresses might feel alienating to the average viewer. And there's no denying that these opulent 1850s style costumes, in particular of course the dresses worn by the character of Elizabeth, are just stunning to look at. For the most part, Frankenstein 2025 sticks very close to the novel in many of its plot points. It even includes the framing device of the North Pole exploration gone wrong. You can tell that the people involved in making this film are not just familiar with the novel, but also had an interest in telling its story as faithfully as possible. So how did they get it so wrong? The changes that I'm about to talk about are perhaps not particularly big when you look at this film in the context of other Frankenstein adaptations. But that's not what we're doing here. So Victor's mother dies in childbirth instead of catching scarlet fever from Elizabeth. Actually, quite a big deal. So Victor makes his discovery as a middle-aged man and not as a baby-faced university student. So in the end, Victor asks for forgiveness and is granted it by his creation. These might be details, but put together they twist the original story, they bend it into a shape I'm convinced Mary Shelley never intended. And really, Objectively, that's fine. This is an interpretation of the novel. It's just an interpretation I don't like, okay? This is my channel and you clicked on this video, so you're getting my take. Just remember that before you pour your outrage into the comment section. One theme that I was disappointed to find almost entirely missing from the film was that of privilege. Mary Shelley goes to great lengths to expand on Frankenstein's family background. She writes about how his father was kind and loving and how he met Victor's mother when she was desolate and impoverished. He talks about how, despite the age difference between them, they had a close and equal relationship marked by a shared outlook on matters of family and politics. Victor grew up in an environment in which any child might thrive. He witnesses his parents' love for him and for others. He witnesses their charity towards the less privileged. And he witnesses the joy they take in their children, both biological and adoptive. This makes Frankenstein's arrogance that drives him to create life, and then his selfishness in abandoning his creation, all the more impactful. This is the hubris of a man who's been given everything he wanted. It's the sort of entitlement that only comes with privilege. In the film, the director chooses instead to make Victor's father abusive towards his wife and son, and to have his mother die in childbirth. Instead of privilege breeding entitlement, it's the old cycle of abuse. Movie Victor is the victim of familial abuse who grows up to become just as manipulative and controlling as his father. As far as motivations for villainy go, it's not the worst, it's a well-known phenomenon. But it's not what Mary Shelley wrote in her novel. She showed how a man can turn out who's used to having everything he wants, to the point where his wants, his demands, become his ruin. He's like a spoiled child who craves a shiny new toy and then discards it as soon as he gets it. Victor's downfall is so scary because even though he has so much, he still wants more. Because the people who surround him, his friends and family, are not enough. These people exist, people whose greed and selfishness knows no end. These are the people who run the world. But in the movie, Frankenstein's motivations are entirely a result of childhood trauma. We see how his father treats him, and then we see him mirror those behaviors in his treatment of the creature. It's lacking all of the nuance of Victor's motivations from the book. And it leads to a weirdly disjointed character growth for both Victor and the creature in the film. On the one hand, the film very clearly portrays Victor as the perpetrator and the creature as the victim. But at the same time, it tries so hard to find excuses for Victor's behavior, mainly his traumatic childhood. Compared to the complex mess of humanity in the book, it's just a bit trite. Let's talk about Elizabeth. Elizabeth in the book is not just a kind and caring person, but she's also absolutely devoted to Frankenstein and their relationship. The creature goes after her as an ultimate act of vengeance. And it's only her death that makes Frankenstein speak up about the creature's existence and his own failings. I hate the girl bossification of Elizabeth in the movie. I don't mind that they gave her an interest in science she didn't have in the book. I don't mind that they fleshed out her personality and made her a bigger part of the plot, but it's so frustrating because I can practically see the director thinking, we can't make her Frankenstein's loving fiance because that would be misogynistic. So instead, they turned her into the ultimate mother figure. Well done. You've done a feminism, except you haven't, because you've taken the only two female characters in the entire movie, both played by the same actor incidentally, but I'm so face-blind I didn't even pick up on that, and reduced them both to the role of mother. The film prominently features this little ivory model of a pregnant woman that Frankenstein is obsessed with. And sadly, that's exactly how the film sees 100% of the female characters in it. In the book, Elizabeth does not represent motherhood. She represents love and care and innocence. And if those are synonymous to you, then you might want to examine your own biases a little bit. Elizabeth in the book is also not the only female character. There's Justine, the maid who's wrongly framed for William's murder. And there is, of course, Frankenstein's mother, Caroline, who in the book doesn't die in childbirth, but instead when she catches scarlet fever after caring for Elizabeth when she gets ill. Again, to the casual observer, these might look like the same thing. Caroline dying of being a mother, but they're not. Dying in childbirth is the director framing her death as a result of the physical state of motherhood. And from what we've seen of Frankenstein's parents' relationship in the film, This might not have been a state that she's actively chosen. In the book, she doesn't die of being a mother in a literal biological way. Instead, she dies because of a choice she makes out of love that she feels for Elizabeth, her adopted child, and this decision she makes to look after her when she gets sick. It's a bizarre choice not to have Elizabeth and Frankenstein romantically involved in the film. Every scene with her and Frankenstein is just so awkward, from the weird rom-com scenes to the stalking in the church to her final moments where Victor shoots her by accident. I did like that they gave her a relationship with the creature, because that aspect actually fits in really well with how Elizabeth is written in the book. But they could have done that without the heavy maternal nature of that relationship. Elizabeth, to the creature, is clearly the parent Victor isn't fit to be. That's all she does. Do you see what I'm getting at? Even though the film gives Elizabeth an interest in bugs, it actually ends up reducing her to a two-dimensional misogynistic trope. A mother figure whose only purpose is mothering. She mothers and then she dies. And her repeated rejection of Frankenstein's advances, just like his childhood trauma at the hands of his father, is yet another way the movie makes excuses for his behavior. Of course he's cruel, he's an incel. No, the tragedy of Frankenstein is that he turned out that way despite having a loving partner and loving parents and a good home. Frankenstein, the novel, is devastating. You feel so much for Victor, and then you feel so much for the creature. And you feel that had things gone a little differently, had both of those characters not been so unfailingly human, things might have turned out well. But they don't, not because there's a villain and a victim, but because it's two people who fuck up in different ways. It's heartbreaking. I was sat on a train holding back tears when the creature meets Frankenstein for the first time and says, "O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature, I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good, misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous." Picture me, on my morning commute, trying not to cry from the sheer desperation of that moment. Whereas I was sat in the cinema last week, watching the film, cringing when Frankenstein's little brother, with his dying breath, says to Victor,
"You are the monster."
Groundbreaking.
Because no, it's not that simple. Frankenstein's behavior towards his creation is cruel. And in the book, that cruelty does not have a neat little explanation like it does in the film. His cruelty is born of pure humanity. Mary Shelley says that we as people do disgusting things for the fun of it, or because we're curious and we don't think through the consequences, because our own privileges and our own selfishness make us make mistakes, and then our shame and our ego make us run from those consequences until they quite literally catch up with us. The film reduces all of that complexity, all of that humanity to bad people do bad things because they had bad things done to them. And on the flip side, we have the creature who does nothing bad ever in the film, apart from murdering a few nameless Danish sailors, of course, but in the visual language of Hollywood, that barely even counts as a character flaw, which is made very clear when the surviving sailors forgive him approximately 5 minutes later. The other deaths in the film are caused either by accident or in self-defense, because you see, the real monster is Victor Frankenstein. Do you get it? He's the real monster. When the creature asks Victor for a companion, movie Frankenstein's responds with basically, "What, so you can have monster sex and make little monster babies?" Whereas in the book, Frankenstein gets to work on making his creature a lady friend and only stops when he considers the question of her agency. He, meaning the creature, had sworn to quit the neighborhood of man and hide himself in deserts, but she had not, and she, who in all probability was to become a thinking and reasoning animal, might refuse to comply with a compact made before her creation. That's right, Victor Frankenstein doesn't go along with his creature's demand for an undead girlfriend because he's actually considering matters of consent. In the book, The creature kills deliberately. He targets Frankenstein's support network. He hunts down the people closest to him. He takes, maybe not pleasure, but satisfaction in driving Frankenstein mad that way. In every conversation, the creature makes sure to bring up just how much stronger and more powerful he is than Frankenstein. Why does he do that? He says it's because the world's rejection of him made him cruel. He develops a deep hatred for humanity, all focused on the humanity of his creator. Beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful. I will watch with the wiliness of a snake that I may sting with its venom. Man, you shall repent of the injuries you inflict. This iconic quote from the book is missing from the film, and that really says everything you need to know about it. The creature from the book is driven by isolation and a deep sense of vengeance. In the film, the creature is as innocent as any 7-foot immortal being with daddy issues can be. And that is doing the creature as a character a deep disservice. This sort of ham-fisted black and white interpretation of the book is something we see throughout the film. It oversimplifies so many of the core themes and messages of the book when it really didn't have to. This film has a runtime of 150 minutes. That's 2.5 hours. It can and does take its time with telling this story. But unfortunately, a lot of that time is spent on extended fight scenes, whether it's the creature tearing apart a whole ship's worth of sailors or a pack of wolves in the woods. I get it. When people go and see Frankenstein, they expect a bit of violence, a bit of gore. But those were the least interesting parts of the film. Seeing Jacob Elordi rip people's faces off with his bare hands starts to lose its appeal after the 3rd or 4th time. Another theme they fumbled is that of isolation. And that's one I was really pissed off about, because it's such a major mood in the book. Right from the beginning, where Walton, the polar explorer of the novel, laments his lack of real friendship. To be fair to the film, I thought the creature's isolation was beautifully portrayed, both in writing and in acting. His longing to be part of the family in the woods, heartbreaking, exquisite, really well done. No, I'm talking about the mishandling of Victor's isolation. In the book, we get to know him at first in the safe surroundings of his family. Then, when he moves abroad to go to university, he starts getting lonely. This is a quote from the book describing Frankenstein's thoughts as he is in the carriage on his way to university. I threw myself into the chase that was to convey me away and indulged in the most melancholy reflections. I, who had ever been surrounded by amiable companions, continually engaged in endeavouring to bestow mutual pleasure, I was now alone. In the university whither I was going, I must form my own friends and be my own protector. He only stops feeling lonely once he gets obsessed with this idea of creating life. That's when he stops writing home to his father and his fiancée. We see him exchange the very real safety of other people with the danger of isolation. That's what makes it so much more poignant that he forces this isolation on his creation. Because when Victor Frankenstein realizes what he's done, when he has that moment of mortification that plunges him into an extended period of nervous breakdown, it's only with the help of his friend Clerval that he recovers. And the first thing he does is return to his family, surrounding himself with other people. The exact thing he denies the creature. But even then, he keeps the darkest and most disturbing part of his character to himself. He doesn't tell anyone about what he did, not until the very end, when the creature has taken his beloved Elizabeth. That's how deep his shame runs. He keeps everything to himself while soothing his self-inflicted discomfort with the company and love of those around him. In the movie, this is completely flipped. The first time we see the adult scientist Victor Frankenstein, he's showing off to a room full of peers. He's proud of his achievements, he talks about them, he wants to share them with the world. Even when the creature has come alive, he's keen to show his work to William and Elizabeth when they visit his laboratory. Book Frankenstein creates life, then has the biggest moment of realization and has a bit of a fainting fit, while the creature runs off into the darkness. What Book Frankenstein doesn't do is chain up the creature in his basement and try to teach him English. The film even introduces a whole new character who's not in the book, Frankenstein's patron Harlander, who's more closely involved in this project than anyone else other than Frankenstein himself. The movie wastes so much time on Harlander when really what it needed was Henry Clerval. The filmmakers did the book dirty by not including Henry Clerval. Clerval is the closest relationship Frankenstein has in this book. He's arguably a more important partner to Frankenstein than Elizabeth. It's him who nurses Frankenstein through his month-long nervous breakdown when Frankenstein realizes what he's done in creating life. It's also him who accompanies Frankenstein to Scotland when the creature puts pressure on him to create a companion for him. And it's his death that makes Frankenstein realize that the creature is not fucking about. It annoys me that the film decided to show the two main characters in such a trivialized way and without any of the nuance that makes Frankenstein such a masterpiece of a novel. Frankenstein was written at a time where Gothic literature was all villains and victims, black and white, heroes and monsters. Mary Shelley took those elements and tropes of Gothic fiction and turned them into a story about humanity with all its complexities. Both Frankenstein and the creature show human nature in their parallel experiences in the world. They're both lonely and they're both cruel. They both make bad decisions and they both suffer the consequences of those decisions. Sadly, all of that was missing from the film. It's frustrating because there was so much brilliant material in there too. The writing was good for the most part, the acting was excellent, the visual was incredible. This film almost got the book, but it's the almost part of it that makes the misses hurt all the harder. If this film had been a through and through bad adaptation of the book, I wouldn't be making this video right now. I'm only talking about it because we very nearly got there. Very nearly, but not quite. Thank you for watching. Bye. That's what makes it so much more poignant. That's what makes it so much more poignant. Bill, how do you say the word again? Poignant. Can you say it again? Poignant? Poignant, is that correct?
I don't know anymore. We've said it too many times.